Defended my son's pursuit of an athletic scholarship over grounding him for clashing with my wife, causing tension in our marriage. My son is 17. My wife and I also have 3 more boys. 2 are from before our marriage, but I'm legally their father now. They are all much younger than my son. My son is starting his senior year of high school next year and hoping to get an athletic scholarship. My son plans to spend all summer practicing. Yesterday my wife asked him to tidy up the living room and he said he was already on the way to the gym. She told him that he could go after tidying. He said he would do it when he got back and left without giving her time to reply. She sent him a text saying he is grounded and then called me to let me know. I told her I would talk to him, but he wasn't grounded. She said he disrespected her, and I said we could and would have a conversation about that, but there would be no grounding. This is my last summer with my oldest child and an important summer, because he's trying to achieve something that can make or break his future. I'm not going to risk ruining either of those things unless it's something really serious. She was very upset. I texted my son that he wasn't grounded, but that we wanted to talk to him when he came home. He said okay and texted me when he was leaving the gym to let us know he was on the way. When he got back we sat down and talked. He said he didn't mind helping out, but that he was a busy person with a busy schedule and wasn't at our beck and call. He said if he is asked in advance to do something he will, but he isn't available to us at the drop of a hat. My wife didn't like that, but I said that was fine. I asked him if he would be willing to clean the living room, and he said he would after taking a shower. While he was in the shower my wife and I got into a big fight. She said I undermined her and all the kids will respect her less. I said she isn't my oldest mother and final say goes to me with him. Any of our other kids and I wouldn't do what I did, but she's not his mom. She was very angry I said that and said she needed space from me. We have only talked as much as necessary today, and I'm getting worried. We are supposed to be at a Memorial Day barbecue in an hour, and she just asked me if I could stay home while she took the boys without me. My oldest has plans with friends and already left. I am wondering if I'm the asshole here. My son always said that he would respect my wife, but she's not his mother. He's never cussed her, shouted at her or what have you. I think it's fair that we stay consistent with her not being his mom. Maybe I'm being a bad husband. Update 1. My wife and the kids got home about an hour ago. After we put the kids to bed, we talked. I asked her, after 5 years of never even attempting to be any sort of mother to my oldest, why she all of a sudden wanted to step into that role. She said she wasn't trying to parent him, that she was just trying to manage the household, and he wasn't cooperating. I said that wasn't a reason to react the way she did, and he was cooperating by offering to do it later. She said she was overwhelmed and needed it done then so she didn't have to think about it. I told her it's very important to me that this last summer be a good one, because I don't know when I'll see him again after this. I mentioned how I'm anxious that I won't be able to attend his big events because he might not want her there, and I can't abandon my wife to travel without her. As I was talking, really rambling more than anything, her eyes lit up. She smiled at me. I thought it was so weird, because I hadn't said anything positive and a moment ago she'd been upset. I asked what was going on. She said nothing. She then asked me if I meant that. I was confused and asked which part. She asked if I'd choose her over my son. I said I'd never choose anything over my children. She said, but if he invited you to visit him and not me, you wouldn't go? I said I couldn't do that to her, it wouldn't be right. As a husband, I can't just abandon her unless it was an emergency or something. Obviously I don't want an emergency, so you can see why I'm stressed about this possible future where I go years without seeing my son. She said she understood and it wouldn't happen again, but the whole interaction was so strange. One moment she was upset and defensive. The next moment she was kissing me and telling me I was going to have a great summer and everything would be okay. The whole thing was so odd. I asked her how the barbecue was and she said it was alright, but it would have been better if I was there, which I had no idea how to respond to. Anyway, I'm typing this in the bathroom. I don't know what to make of this situation. Half of me thinks this is a resolution and I can put it behind me, and maybe the other half is too paranoid from reading so many comments, but that half thinks this is just a symptom of a bigger problem. Either way, my wife is happy, so I'm better off than I was before, I suppose. Because the way the initial convo about cleaning is described, she sounds like she's very much approaching it from the perspective of a parental/adult figure who is accustomed to and expecting respectful obedience from a child in her charge. But at the same time, the text and tone of your comment replies almost makes it sound like you're the only parental figure for him in your household, and your son and wife have a roommate-like relationship, where requests for help cleaning are not commands, but subject to discussion between the two people, as equals. If this is the case, then why would her expectations be so far off with the cleaning/gym conversation? Why would she think she could ground him? Has she grounded him in the past? So which perspective on their relationship is correct? Is she his stepmother, or his roommate who happens to be married to his father? Update 2. Here's the update. I talked to my son today. I asked him if something had happened between the two of them prior to the above incident. I said I wasn't looking for someone to blame, just to figure out the reason for the sudden shift. He said there was one weird incident, but he didn't know if it was related and wasn't sure how I would react to hearing about it. I asked him to tell me and promised I wouldn't have a negative reaction. Here I have to provide context I didn't think was relevant in the original post, but turns out is. I'm going to give an overview that isn't detailed because there was a lot of sexist language in the comments of the first post, and I don't want to read any racial slurs. My ex-wife and I both grew up in bilingual homes as members of a minority culture, and when we got married our plan was to eventually move to our homeland once we were more stable financially. As I grew in my career I felt less and less connected to our culture. I realized I didn't want to go anywhere. I like it in America. When my father died my ex thought it was the perfect time to leave, that we should sell the house I inherited from him and use the proceeds to fund the move. I said I didn't want to go anymore. That's why we divorced and why she moved overseas. 4 years later I met my current wife. By that time I wasn't engaging with the community I grew up with in any way other than facilitating my son's involvement with it. My wife knows my heritage, but it's never been an issue because I've essentially abandoned it. So here's what my son told me happened last week. He was sitting with my 4-year-old, my wife and I shared biological child, and teaching him a few words of our language. My wife came into the room, saw him, called over the 4-year-old, took him by the hand and led him out of the room without a single word to my son. He said he could see the anger in her even though she didn't say anything to him. I had trouble seeing the connection between the two events, but I decided to talk to her about it. She'd been in a great mood all day since we made up last night, so I thought she'd be okay with talking. When I asked about the incident she took a long time to answer. Finally she said that she never agreed to marry a word for someone of my background, and that when she saw that she became afraid that our son, who is only 4, would grow up thinking he was a same word, because, oldest son, is and that's confusing for a child. I was kind of thrown to be honest. I said I understood her point, but what is the harm in him learning a few words of another language? It's doubtful he'll remember them, and if he does, that's just a sweet connection between him and his grandparents. She said absolutely not. She said our kids are American and they're going to speak English and she won't stand for my son teaching them that crap. I was really hurt by this response, but I didn't want to be a hypocrite. After all, this all started because she didn't keep our agreement not to try to parent my son. So she's entitled to expect me not to teach our kids about my background, because I explicitly told her I didn't care about that stuff anymore and wasn't a part of that community anymore. So I said okay. I said I just wish she had talked to me instead of lashing out at my son. She said she was sorry for doing that, and in the future if there was an issue like that she'd come tell me. I thanked her and she said she was glad it all got resolved. I guess I am too, but I feel a little disappointed that she feels so strongly about our son never learning about his heritage. His great-grandparents were immigrants with interesting stories, and maybe he won't ever care about that, but maybe one day he will care and want to know. I don't think that's so bad, but it isn't worth another fight. But you're okay because you chose to leave your heritage behind and, of course, adopt her 2 boys and give her and them a better life. Update 3 It started innocuously enough. On Tuesday, I came home to find my 17-year-old working in the backyard, surrounded by language, flashcards and those elementary-level picture dictionaries. Scattered around him were my 4-year-old and my wife's youngest, who is 6. They were practicing counting in our ancestral language, numbers, colors, simple greetings, interspersed with peals of laughter and very, very vigorous correcting for my son whenever the accent was off. It was innocent, and honestly, heartwarming. I found myself standing by the sliding glass door just watching. My wife came home from the store a half hour later, saw them together, and at first didn't say anything. She stopped briefly, took it all in, then just gave my son a short nod. He nodded back, weirdly formal, but better than the tension from last week. I was still considering whether to make a comment when, that night after the kids were in bed, my wife told me she wanted to talk. She started by apologizing again for the language comment last week, admitting she'd acted out of fear more than anything. She said she didn't want our kids to feel divided, like they belonged to 2 different families within the same house. She was quiet for a moment and then blurted out, "But maybe I'm the one dividing things." That caught me off guard. She admitted she's been feeling isolated. Our 2 shared children, and even her 2 from before our marriage, have both me and her equally. She never questioned her role there. But with my oldest, she'd always felt like an outsider, and watching him speak a language she didn't understand with the little ones, she finally realized, it wasn't about the heritage stuff. It was about her fear of being left out, of not being able to connect with everyone as deeply as she wanted. She told me she'd signed up for an intro class in our ancestral language at the public library, a 6-week basics course that starts next month. I was honestly stunned. I asked if she wanted me or my son to help her practice, and she said, "Yes, but you need to know I'm going to be really bad at this and I'm probably going to get frustrated." I laughed, and she genuinely smiled. The next night, bringing even more change, my son asked if he could host a group of teammates from school for dinner, an international-themed potluck at our place. My wife, overhearing, insisted on helping him. Together, they planned the menu. My son would make a dish from our homeland, he called Grandma and got an authentic recipe. My wife would make a classic American casserole, and she helped her boys choose recipes from their own backgrounds. It turned into a full family kitchen effort. Everybody was shoulder to shoulder, tossing flour, chopping vegetables, arguing about the right way to layer ingredients. My wife and my son had to work out logistics and timing, and I heard her gently correct him on pan temperature and him retort, "That's not how grandma does it," but both were laughing. Dinner itself was chaos. Teenage athletes wolfing down food like they'd never eaten before, my little ones offering everyone tastes of words in 3 different languages, my wife showing off her first halting but earnest greeting, which my son translated for his friends with way more patience than he gives anyone else. I realized, sitting at the end of the table, that the house felt lighter than it had in months. We did get an unexpected curveball after dessert, though. My son's ex-teammate pulled me aside and told me my boy had been checked out at practice for a week and seemed distracted. He worried the scholarship scouts would get the wrong impression. I pulled my son aside after everyone else left and asked if he was overwhelmed. He was quiet for a while, then admitted he was exhausted, not from practice, but from feeling like he was always in the wrong place, caught between his loyalty to me, his half and step siblings, his team, and trying to keep things smooth at home while making all the adults happy. He said it was nice when his stepmom let him do the language lesson. He hadn't realized he wanted her approval until he got it. That was a punch in the gut. All this time, I thought I'd made things easier for him by keeping everything so separate, but he just felt more alone. The next morning, coffee in hand, I told my wife about what he'd said. She surprised me again. Let him choose his own path, and let's be honest with all the kids about how messy families are. No more tiptoeing around who's mom or dad to whom. Let's just try. So, here's where we are now. All 5 of us started studying the basics of the ancestral language, Duolingo, library course, post-its on the fridge. We're taking turns letting each child introduce something about their personal history or heritage at a weekly family night. First up, my wife's eldest, who wants to show us 90s hip-hop videos and explain why Tupac is the GOAT. My son talked, on his own, with his stepmom about his schedule and agreed to one household contribution chore every day after practice, on his own time, which makes my wife feel more supported and more in control. I set up a group chat for the whole family. Everyone's included, even my ex, so she can pitch in with language tips and family recipes for the kids. It's not perfect. There are flare-ups. My son gets grumpy, my wife gets flustered. But last night, when my son came in late after practice, my wife called out, "You want leftovers or do you want to microwave it yourself, coach?" And he didn't even hesitate. "Save some for me, mom." She didn't correct him or point it out, just nodded. None of us moved into the neat, tidy roles we thought we wanted. Instead, it's messy, and awkward, and at moments stiff, but we've somehow let go of the fantasy that everyone has to be cut off from their own family threads just to feel accepted. In this one, maybe the wildest thing, when I asked my son if he wanted us at his next tournament, wife included, he grinned and groaned, "Wouldn't be the same without you guys embarrassing me from the stands." My wife started teasing about face paint. Update for yesterday morning, my son woke us at 6 a.m., pounding on our door and yelling, "Dad! Come quick, you gotta see this." Groggy and mentally planning which child's crisis I was about to referee, I expected the usual disaster: broken window, flooded sink, maybe even a stuck toy. Instead, he dragged me outside in pajamas and pointed at a wild little assembly on the lawn. My 4-year-old, my step 6-year-old, and their 2 neighbor friends buried under mounds of dirt, each holding homemade flags glued to wooden spoons. On the flags, wobbly marker words in our ancestral language, and nonsense crests, "The kingdom of breakfast." My son beamed, "We're doing a scavenger hunt." I taught everybody the clues in 3 languages. He looked so proud, and so big, next to the others. And a little less weighed down than last week. My wife came out next, yawning, and just stood there, hands on hips, regarding the scene, her boys dirt-smeared and giggling, my oldest sternly reciting the rules, and our youngest shrieking no peeking. In an accent even I couldn't place. My wife shook her head, half exasperated, half smiling, her standard new pose. After the chaos died down, and coffee was had, she suggested something totally out of character for a Saturday. What if we all went out to brunch? Just us, even if it means the kitchen gets trashed later. I said sure, and to my surprise so did all the kids, even my son, despite having practice later. At the diner, sandwiched in a booth beneath a tacky painting of chickens, we tried to do one of those everyone say something they're proud of from this week things my wife swore would be cheesy but good for family bonding. It quickly devolved. My 4-year-old said that I burped and nobody noticed, then my step 6-year-old one-upped with that I sneaked 2 desserts after dinner and nobody noticed. My oldest, not to be outdone, just said, "I'm proud I didn't tell Dad about either of those." My wife snorted coffee through her nose. But that's the thing, it was ordinary, but it wasn't. For the first time, nobody was tiptoeing or glancing to me for approval. Even my wife and son had this quick, subtle way of checking in. Something had definitely changed. Not perfect, just easier. And then came the plot twist, a classic courtesy of my ex. My son's mom, still overseas, texted me out of nowhere, "Your son tells me you're all learning the family language now. About time. When are you coming to visit?" The message ended with a winking emoji that somehow felt like both an accusation and a challenge. I read it out at dinner. My wife froze for a second, then said, "Maybe I should start practicing my travel phrases now." My son offered to give her lessons, her, specifically. Not me. When she agreed, he joked, but only after you can count to 10 without getting the numbers mixed up. She rolled her eyes, but there was something else in her smile, something almost like relief. Later that night, just us in the kitchen, my wife did something she never does. She apologized again. She admitted she'd always worried my son would resent her, or feel like she was trying to force her way into his life when she didn't have any real claim, but that lately, after all these messy talks and accidental kitchen dance parties, he was letting her in. She said, "I never got to be his mother. But it turns out he didn't need that. He just needed me to be here. That's it." She started to cry, full, ugly cry, and I held her. My oldest, on his way past midnight, looking for snacks, stopped and saw, and without prompt, quietly put a hand on her shoulder. "Thanks for putting up with all of us," he said, soft. "We're a lot." Then he grinned, "But at least we're better than Mom's side of the family." My wife laughed, wiped her eyes, and handed him a Tupperware of leftovers. The next morning was the local tournament. Something wild happened. My wife, without consulting anyone, corralled all the boys, got them into matching red and green t-shirts with team, our last name, her idea of our heritage colors, and organized ugly, hand-painted posters. We showed up, a motley, noisy crew. My son saw us, cheeks slowly burning at our chanting, and after his team won, the unlikely underdogs, he let us hug him in front of everyone. And when one of his teammates asked if that was his whole family, he just said, "Yeah. It's a lot. They're mine." That night, for the first time, he asked if he could invite both me and his stepmom, by name, to his regional tryouts. Not because he had to, or because he was afraid of hurting anyone, but because it was his win, and he wanted us there. My wife and I sat together after, on the porch, watching the kids wind down inside. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, almost shy, "I think we're finally figuring this out." And maybe she's right. We're still messy, a little loud, and just enough of a disaster, but somehow, this is the closest we've ever come to all being on the same team. Update 3 days ago, my son came home from practice wired with excitement, waving a crumpled letter from a summer athletic camp, very prestigious, only a dozen high schoolers statewide accepted. The catch, the camp was 2 states away and started in 5 days, and, in what felt like a cosmic joke, the required forms included signatures from both parents and guardians, plus insurance, medical info, and, since my son was under 18, travel permission that needed to list all legal custodial figures. Which, of course, included me, his mom overseas, Q time zone math headaches, and, for the first time ever, my wife as a required emergency contact. That night, we FaceTimed his biological mother. It began awkwardly, as these things always do, with forced pleasantries and my ex correcting my pronunciation the way only she would dare. My son, a little more grown up these days, handled her questions about sports, school, and whether he was still eating like an American. My wife hovered uncertainly, not sure how much to insert herself, until my son, grinning, yanked her into the frame and introduced her in our native language. "This is my stepmom, but she's family." My ex, to everyone's shock, responded in English, something she never does. "Thank you for looking after my boy," she said, gentle but direct. "He is lucky." There was a long silence where my wife, clearly moved and embarrassed, just said "I try," and that was that. The forms got done, after about 6 scans and 3 phone calls to the camp office, but the logistics were only half the chaos. The younger boys, mine, hers, and those in between, realized their big brother would be gone all summer. Panic. There were hastily convened council meetings, handwritten contracts, 1 call every week or we riot, and a backyard sleepover where secrets were exchanged by flashlight along with disgustingly sticky s'mores. But in the middle of that, the neighborhood pulled us into their drama, a legendary, annual soccer v. baseball match between the block's families, parents versus kids. This year, with our blended family officially all in, there was no ducking out. My wife, who claims she can't catch, organized the defense. I got stuck coaching offense. You're fast, but run in a straight line. My son demanded to be captain. Everyone from the 4-year-old to the teenagers played, and even convinced 2 reluctant neighbors to join. Halfway through, I looked over to see my wife, brandishing a wooden spoon like a whistle, yelling elaborate advice in 3 languages. At one ridiculous moment, she barked something in what I think was supposed to be my ancestral tongue, and all the kids stopped and stared, then erupted in giggles. My son, red-faced, shouted, "Give her the team t-shirt already." It was mayhem. We lost spectacularly. Both sides claimed victory. But the boundary lines between my kids and your kids disappeared, just muddy faces, tangled arms, and shared inside jokes. That night, my wife called an impromptu family council, her new idea, apparently, for all big transitions. We laid out plans, who would call and write the camp-bound son, what video chat times worked, what we wanted to do with this wild, blended family nest before he left for the summer. My wife quietly asked if, for his going-away dinner, we could make foods from everywhere, all the places the boys have roots. My son, the holdout for years, surprised us by asking if he could invite my ex, his mom, into the group chat. "We're all family," he shrugged. "Right?" Then came the shocker. Our youngest, during his daily spy mission, snooping in the house and reporting on secrets, came running with a battered cardboard box unearthed from under the basement stairs. Inside, a yellowed envelope addressed to my father, unopened for decades. Inside the envelope, a letter, written in my ancestral language, from my own grandfather, a story none of us had ever heard. He wrote of escaping war, starting over in a strange new land, saving every cent for the house we now call home. He ended with, "Let this house always be for family, any kind, any who wander in." There it was, proof that, years before I'd buried my heritage or married again or even thought about what blended family could possibly mean, someone in my bloodline had prayed for exactly this kind of mess, a home where everyone could find their place. My wife cried when I tried to translate aloud, not bothering to correct me. My son, who had spent so much energy holding everyone at arm's length, asked if we could copy the letter and hang it by the front door. He and my wife worked out the translation together, kitchen table crowded with dictionaries and snacks. The morning my son left for camp, all of us, including the sleepy 4-year-old with bed hair, my wife still clutching her morning coffee, and her boys with cardboard good luck signs, waved him off in the driveway. No awkwardness. No divided loyalties. Just hope. Before he got in the car, he hugged his little brothers, then, to my wife, said, "Make sure you practice. When I get back, I want you to beat me at counting to 20 in our language." My wife held it together till the car pulled away, then grabbed my hand. I used to worry so much about where I fit. Now I think, maybe I just needed to let myself belong. That afternoon, as we put the translated letter on the wall, our youngest asked, "Does this mean everyone can stay here forever?" I started to say something serious and philosophical, but my wife cut in with a wink, "Only if you keep your room clean." The boys erupted in fake groans, but I think we all agree, that's exactly the kind of family this house was built for. Update 6. I thought things had settled, that we'd turn the final page on the whole saga. My son was off at camp, we FaceTimed weekly, once the Wi-Fi at the cabin stopped making his voice sound like a possessed robot. My wife was officially on day 13 of Duolingo streak. She would announce it with deadpan seriousness every evening, demanding someone quiz her on numbers or animal names, even if we were mid-brushing teeth or chasing a spilled cup of milk. The translation of my grandfather's letter hung framed by the front door, now smudged with a galaxy of fingerprints from small hands stopping to trace the letters. And then, out of nowhere, the universe decided we needed a new test. On a rainy Wednesday, my phone buzzed with an email from my son's camp director. The subject line, "Immediate, family participation, cultural night." Long story short, a summer storm had knocked out their entertainment plans, and in a moment of camp desperation, the director asked if any families could come to the closing weekend to share traditions or heritage. My son, ever the instigator, had put our family's name down for a heritage language game and story. I almost said no immediately. I mean, family heritage night, 2 states away, in front of a mess of other teens and parents, what could possibly go wrong? But my wife read the email beside me and, before I could talk myself out of it, said, "If we can get the time off, let's do it. This will embarrass him so much, and that's practically a parental duty." We broke the news to the kids that night. The little ones exploded in excitement, my 4-year-old insisting we all dress up. In what? He was vague, just something fancy in language Y, while the 6-year-old immediately suggested we bring a giant pot of spaghetti. Wrong culture but correct enthusiasm. My wife, who'd signed herself up as cultural ambassador and language novice in the family group chat, got to work, learning not just the basics but, God help me, campfire songs in our ancestral tongue. I've never seen her more obsessed, sticky notes everywhere, the bathroom mirror dotted with conjugations, the fridge boasting vocabulary charts, even the bedtime stories got an overhaul, now a patchwork quilt of proverbs, some I half remembered, most mangled, and all somehow accepted by the kids as gospel truth. Meanwhile, my ex caught wind. The next FaceTime, she actually laughed when I told her about the invitation, one of those full, belly-deep, teeth-baring laughs I hadn't heard from her in years. He's always been like this, if he likes something, everyone around him will know, and if he loves it, they'll be stuck doing it. My wife, lurking just off camera but listening, beamed. At the end of the call, my ex asked, "Are you going to sing? Please tell me you'll sing." She knew it was my deepest dad fear, and hung up delighted. The day of family cultural night finally arrived. We packed the SUV with snacks, the translation letter, frame and all, homemade flashcards, and a battered old folktale book my son had begged me to bring. The drive was 6 hours of language karaoke, my wife butchering the accent, the boys gleefully correcting her, and me realizing I remembered less than I thought. 2 potty stops and 1 language-induced meltdown later, we arrived at the camp just as the clouds parted. Our son met us at the entrance, not shy, but taller, tanner, even sheepishly pleased to see us. He didn't even pretend not to know us this time. "You ready?" he said. I signed us up to go first. If we're amazing, we set the bar low for everyone else. We gathered in the battered rec hall, parents and teens jammed together on fold-out chairs, everyone buzzing. My wife led our little ones through greetings in 3 languages, hands shaking only slightly. My stepson told a joke that made 0 sense, but got a laugh anyway. I read my grandfather's letter, barely making it through without losing my voice, my son translating the hardest bits, my wife squeezing my hand under the table. Then my son, braver than anyone I know, stood in front of a room of strangers and told the story of our house. He told them about a family who came to a new country, a house that became a sanctuary for every kind, the messiness and pride of piecing together all the parts of who you are. He explained how the kids teach each other words no adult remembers, how we make food from cookbooks none of us really understand, and why, no matter what language you speak, everybody gets to belong. He ended with, even if you think you're the odd one out, the real story is that you're the thread that holds things together. And then, as if on cue, the youngest piped up, no stage fright, not in this family, and if you clean your room. The applause was thunderous. Parents came up after, some with tears, asking how we started, how we blended so well. I laughed and said, we mostly just mess up together, my wife nodding in agreement. My son got hugged to near death by the little kids, and the program director asked to copy our translation. She wanted it up at camp every summer. As we packed the car to leave, my son slipped me a folded note, a flashcard ring he'd made to help my wife practice, and a sheet with the family proverb, the last line of the letter, transliterated into blocky, kid handwriting. There was one last surprise when we got home. The group chat pinged alive with a message from my son's mom, who'd watched the event on shaky camp Wi-Fi. I'm proud of you guys. All of you. Especially the funny American, she wrote, meaning my wife. No sarcasm. My wife grinned and turned pink. Then, in a shock to everyone, she typed her reply, in our ancestral language. It was clumsy, hilarious, and full of errors. Nobody cared. I don't know how long the peace will last, or if we'll ever have totally smooth days. But our family, fractured, blended, paper-mended, proud, humble, loud, stood up in a room full of strangers and didn't flinch. We messed up. We laughed. And in the end, we belonged, every last imperfect one of us. Turns out, the only secret to blending is letting everyone be themselves together, and maybe never, ever running away from a little family embarrassment in front of strangers.